Joining me now, we have foreign affairs columnist for the Washington Post and MS Now contributor David Ignatius, retired Major General Dana Pittard, and on set here with me, Washington correspondent for Bloomberg, Jeff Mason. Thank you all for being here. So, David, President Trump told CNBC the U.S. is, quote, ahead of schedule when it comes to Iran and things are moving in a positive direction. What does that mean? Is it all about the death of Khamenei?
We don't know what the schedule is. We don't know much about this operation at all. But certainly in the first 24 hours, there was enormous firepower loosed on Iran. The death of not just of the supreme leader, but of the head of the IRGC, the defense minister, a series of top personnel, essentially all the top leadership of the Iranian intelligence service are gone. So I think the dilemma for President Trump now is that he set a very broad goal in announcing this war early Saturday morning, essentially saying that he wanted to give the Iranian people the opportunity to replace their regime by attacking their leadership in a way that no American president had done since the revolution. If he's going to do that, it's going to take a while. That's a big obligation that he's undertaken. He's asked Iranians to risk their lives because he says he'll stand behind them. If he's going to do that, if that's really his policy, he's going to need support from the country. He's going to need to go to Congress, not simply to satisfy the War Powers Act requirements, but to make sure that the American public really is prepared to stay the course in what could be a long, difficult, in some way. Standing with the Iranian people now is a good idea. I think few people who know Iran would doubt that, but it's a costly one, and people need to think it through carefully.
So, Jeff, you've done extensive reporting on the administration's decision to launch these strikes. I'm curious, what was the tipping point that made them step away from diplomacy, and what is the feeling of things right now in both the White House and Mar-a-Lago, where the president is?
Sure. Yeah, the tipping point was, according to U.S. officials, that they essentially determined or concluded that Iran was not going to give up its pursuit of a nuclear weapon and that it was not willing to negotiate about ballistic missiles. And despite the fact that they were still talking and they had said that there would be some more talks next week in Vienna, it wasn't going in the direction that the United States wanted. And then they informed the president about that. There have been some other reports that he got some persuasive calls from Saudi Arabia and Israel about the fact that this was a good time. And then he decided to do it.
So, General, what has been the strategy behind Iran's retaliatory strikes? What does it tell us about their capabilities and priorities right now?
Well, I think what it tells us is that Iran still has capability. We've decapitated their senior leadership, but they've got a deep bench as far as their leadership. They're a country of 80 to 90 million people. They've got a large military force with a lot of capabilities. Their ballistic missiles are still going strong. They had a couple thousand remaining. So they still have capabilities, but they're having issues, obviously, with command and control at the senior levels.
And David, as I look at your article, here's what you write, that Trump's Iran operation is, quote, the opposite of one and done. You alluded to that in your last answer. And you add, if there's a plan for what's next, I haven't heard any, or Israeli official explain it. So how long of U.S. involvement are we looking at? Do you think the administration even knows, or even might have a cutoff point at which they say, we're done?
Alice, we just don't know. That's the problem here. There's a major undertaking by the United States, and we don't have answers to that. I was struck that today President Trump, in an interview with The Atlantic, said he was ready to talk to Iranian leaders, that they'd reached out and he wanted to talk to them. One thing that we've seen with President Trump is he likes to Star Wars. He goes in strong, pow, and then he wants to negotiate. That was the pattern in the earlier strikes in June of last year against Iran. Maybe that's what we're going to see. The problem is that leaves the country completely in between two regimes, with Khamenei and his leadership team shattered, new people rushing to try to take their places, the Iranian people obviously hungering to see the crowds cheering after Khamenei was killed, hungering for something different. And I think that's the president needs a clear plan. And as I said, I haven't heard one yet.
Jeff, you want to comment?
Yeah, a couple of things from the interviews that he did with a handful of my colleagues. Number one, the president has sort of, I don't want to call it a tick, but he has a standard answer for a bunch of things. Number one, an announcement is always 2 weeks away.
True.
He's always willing
True.
to talk, and things are always ahead of schedule. He said the same thing about the ballroom, which technically construction hasn't even started on the ballroom, and he said that it's ahead of schedule. That's not to say not to take it seriously when he says that about Iran, but it is something that he repeatedly uses as a turn of phrase. I think it's a question that we'd want to ask exactly, like, what is the schedule if it's ahead of schedule, and how is it possible to be ahead of schedule when you're really only about 48 hours into this intervention?
Have you heard anything about the prospect of him returning to talks? I mean, here we are 2 days later after bombing. I mean, they were supposed to be, which you mentioned, in Vienna tomorrow.
Yeah. I haven't heard anything about a continuation of talks. My guess is the fact that this has happened and that Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff concluded that the talks weren't going in the direction that was serious, and thus stemming this strike. It seems unlikely to me that talks are going to start again soon. That said, once there is leadership in Iran, if the president really is willing to have talks, maybe it'll start again. It's hard to say.
It begs the question, with whom would the president even be speaking right now?
Ding, ding, ding. And would Iran be willing to talk to a country that has just sent in these, killed its leader and had strikes all over its nation?
David, your thoughts on with whom the president would even be talking right now? I mean, who do you surmise, and I know it's pure speculation, but who would have even called the president to say, if you have the majority of leadership having been annihilated by these strikes, who's even going to call and say, hey, we'd like to talk with you about things?
We don't know. The person who Khamenei had designated to organize policy in the event that he was killed is Ali Larijani, a very experienced veteran of this regime, smart, often a pliant negotiator, but very, in the end, very, very hard line. Is he going to emerge as the strong man in the interim? Will Trump, in effect, give him legitimacy by talking to him? That's a fascinating question for me. Is there other fragmentation within the IRGC leadership, other people pushing to the fore? Those are the questions that I think a lot of us will be looking closest at. What's happening inside Iran now?
Pardon me, as I look at a little bit about this gentleman of whom you're speaking, he's got to be a hardliner, because he is the director of the revered Qom Seminary since 2016, a member of the very powerful Guardian Council. That would not indicate any sort of lessening of the austerity of the current regime, or that which has just been decimated in the next couple of days, right, David? So
Ali Larijani is as tough as they come. To be blunt, he has blood on his hands. But he has been a very successful player of the Iranian game now for several decades.
General, are there any hopes that the military can further the efforts of the United States in helping to bring about an opportunity for the Iranian people to pursue a path to democracy? Again, from the air, without boots on the ground.
A simple answer, I think, would be no to that. I mean, what the military is doing quite a bit. Needs to really destroy the Iranian Navy. They've gone a little bit towards that in the ballistic missile threat of Iran. Finish off as much as you can from the air, their nuclear capability. Obviously, they decapitated the leadership. But to change a government and change a regime, the people of Iran are going to need help. And my biggest concern is the negotiations will start again, and then the Iranian people who we wanted to overthrow the government will be left in a lurch a little bit. So there's got to be a plan to support them. I mean, they're going against an armed force, hundreds of thousands of armed Iranian security forces. And so they must get help if we really do expect them to overthrow the government.
General, last question. Is there any way 2 days into this operation that anybody has an idea of how long this can last, whether it's you speculating or anybody inside the administration? Because aren't there a number of variables that have to take place to make that determination?
No one really knows. I mean, the administration, sometimes you get drunk with success, from Venezuela, and that happened so quickly and was bloodless. Obviously, we lost 3 troops today, and heart goes out to their families. Those of us who served, we understand that. But starting a war is always easy. It's ending the war, and having a peace that is meaningful is the hard part. And I don't think the administration fully grasps that at this point.
That's a sobering concept, but we'll leave it there. David Ignatius, General David Petarde, and of course, my friend Jeff Mason here in studio with me. It's good to see you all. Thank you so much, gentlemen.